question feature at the bottom center of your screen. We will address as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. However, if we aren't able to get to all of your questions live today, we'll do our best to also follow up individually. Now, I would like to introduce our presenter for today's webinar. Willa DiConstanzo is the City of Lincoln's Waste Diversion Coordinator. She'll be sharing recycling rules and some pro tips with us. In addition, we encourage you to bookmark recycle.lincoln.ne.gov for an easy reference to recycling best practices and resources beyond what will be discussed today. We're also available by phone to discuss your questions at the number on the slide. We'll share these resources and more again at the end of the presentation, along with details on how you can sign up for the Recycle Lincoln newsletter. And with that, I'll turn it over to Willa.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Let's go ahead and get started. So what is wrong with this photo? This was taken at one of Lincoln's consumer recyclables collection sites. There are currently 19 operated in Lincoln and then 9 in rural Lancaster County where residents can deposit their household recyclables. We have another follow-up picture for you to look at. Oftentimes we hear or we see that cardboard or other recyclables are left on the ground at our consumer recyclable collection sites. We also often hear that a bin is missing or that a bin is full at collection sites. So we wanted to advise you on some tips and best practices when you visit. Please do not leave your recyclables on the ground. And I want to give you a couple examples of why we don't want that behavior to be recognized at sites. We have to deploy staff to pick up those recyclables that are left on the ground. And that kind of takes away activities from other engagement that we're doing at solid waste management facilities. Another reason that we don't want those materials on the ground is it's a safety hazard. We have many people visiting these sites. And if there is cardboard or any other material, tin, aluminum cans left on the ground, we want to make sure that people don't have any slips, trips, or falls, and that everybody can safely recycle at our site. Another reason is that it can be blown away and turned into litter. So many times you take a lot of effort to get those recyclables to the site. And if they're left on the ground, we can't guarantee that a Nebraska wind won't come up and blow those recyclables away. And the last is when one person sets a recyclable item on the ground, it tends to encourage others to do the same thing. So don't lead by example and leave those materials on the ground. Please be sure to just place them in a bin. But if a bin is missing, we wanted to give you guidance on what happens in that case too. So as I said earlier, we have a lot of people coming to these sites and those bins get filled up quickly. So our contractor will work to remove a bin, take it to our processing center, empty it, and then bring it back to the site. So if you're there and you see a missing bin, try back in maybe 1 or 2 hours, or you can always find another one of our 19 sites on our website, recycle.lincoln.ne.gov. Or you can always subscribe to curbside recycling also for your ease. Cardboard in general needs to be broken down and flattened at our sites. Boxes that aren't flattened take up more space in the bin, and others won't be able to get their boxes in there either. And the last tip that we have when visiting our sites is that we want you to fill those bins from the back all the way to the front. So we have a lot of material coming into those sites all the time. And if we fill the back first, then it's not misleading to other residents that end up at the site and are trying to put it in the very front of the bin. Generally, if you walk towards the back, there is some open space to place those materials. And we don't want to be hauling air to the recycling processing center. So we want to make sure we get them filled up as much as possible. So let's look at another picture. What's wrong in this picture? One of the largest challenges in recycling, not only locally, but globally, is the inclusion of plastic bags or bagged recyclables. Plastic bags contaminate recycling, and they really hurt the recycling process. The equipment that is used at processing centers gets tangled up in the gears with these plastic bags as they come through. Then staff or contractors have to go in, halt the processing of those recyclable materials, and they have to literally cut all of those bags out of the equipment. So, best tip is go bag free when recycling. If you need a bag, you could try using a paper bag to put your recyclable items in instead of a plastic bag. Brown paper bags can go in your curbside recycling, or they can be recycled at one of our consumer recyclable collection sites. Leave all of the plastic bags out of your curbside recycling bin and bins at the collection site. Instead, we'll talk later more about plastic bags or plastic film, but we're going to talk about where you can put them, which is retail or grocery stores, and give you some more guidance on what to do with those bags. Speaking of bags, we have another image for you to look at here. We see a lot of shredding paper, and we'll accept that at recycling sites, but you can't put it in a plastic bag. As we stated on the prior slides, those plastic bags really are an issue for the machines at recycling processing centers. So we recommend that you put your shredded paper in a brown paper bag. You can fold it over a couple times to seal it at the top, and that really indicates that all of that paper will stay in there. Shredded paper, as you know, can fly very easily. So the more that it is tightly compounded into a container, the better it is for reducing litter. Another helpful tip that I have to remind myself of is that paper should not be crushed or balled, and it should be just left flat or as flat as possible. So my Post-it notes, for example, I generally try and crunch them up when I'm done with my to-do list, but instead I just put them all on a sheet of paper and leave them as flat as possible so they can get through the machines at the processing facilities and go to a new. Our next image that we have for you is circled in red. Now, cardboard in general is really great for shipping. It's readily recyclable, but sometimes other materials such as styrofoam or plastic or bubble wraps get included in the packaging with that cardboard container. These items are not accepted through curbside recycling, nor are they accepted at the city-operated consumer recyclable collection site. So the best recommendation that I have for you is to flatten your cardboard immediately. That will ensure that all of those extra items that you may have had within your package when you received it are gone and they are removed from that box. It saves space by flattening your cardboard, as we talked about beforehand, and it ensures, once again, that there are no other items left inside. When we remove those items, we can just place them into our trash can, and it really reduces the amount of contamination that can come in for cardboard specifically. So this is another item that we see quite frequently. And as we know, in spring comes yard work, and that includes raking leaves and mowing lawns. So it's a good time for your yard or around your neighborhood to pick up any loose litter that may be around. But that loose litter, as you're raking or mowing, really needs to be picked up beforehand. And I'm going to tell you why in a little bit. The best practice that you can do is to place your yard waste into a brown paper bag. Because from April 1st to December 1st each year, yard waste has to be separated from your regular garbage. This can be done in a variety of ways. A couple ways that we have for you today are mulching or composting your yard waste of home. On our website, we have additional tips for you on how to do that. Contacting your garbage collector to include yard waste as a separate item that they can pick up. Or you can personally haul your yard waste to the North 48th Street transfer station. That is north of Cornhusker, north of Superior. You'll essentially T-bone right on into it. If you use a hauler or you bring your yard waste to the North 48th Street transfer station, we wanted to show you what will be done with it. We actually use all of that feedstock to make Lindgrow compost. The leaves and the grass and the wood chips are mixed together in somewhat of a recipe. And that's why it's so important that we do not have your littered yard material in there, and why we request that you pick that up first before you put it in those brown paper bags. The more litter that ends up in our yard waste, the more contamination that we have to deal with when we are creating or letting that compost get mixed together. After our compost has been completed, it generally takes about a year, it can be picked up from the North 48th Street transfer station once again. It is self-load there, and there is no cost associated to pick up that compost. Now, again, we have tips for how you need to mix that compost with your current soil that you have in your yard to ensure that you have the proper mix to be able to utilize that compost. The compost itself can also be picked up by bulk at the Bluff Road Solid Waste Management Facility. And if you have additional questions about any of this, I am more than happy to help. We'll put my number on the last slide, and please don't hesitate to reach out to me. This is a question we get quite a bit at our office. Can this pizza box be recycled? So if we have any food or residue, including grease stains on our cardboard, that could really cause contamination in the recycling process. Our best recommendation, if you're eating pizza at home, is to remove that top lid. Most of the times there's a serrated piece at the very top that you can just rip off. The top piece can be recycled because normally there's not as much grease or any cheese or anything else left in that container. But the bottom part, where you have sticky cheese or grease that's pretty soaked in there, does need to go into the garbage. And just overarchingly, as a reminder, 2 years ago, the city of Lincoln enacted a cardboard ban from our Lincoln Bluff Road landfill. And so that's exciting because we're making sure that cardboard has another life to it. So we want to make sure that as we recycle cardboard, we recycle it correctly. Another often item that we see or we get questions on frequently is dirty containers. So leaving liquid or food or other residue in the containers can also cause contamination. And that is seen here in a ketchup bottle. We see it or hear questions very frequently in peanut butter containers also. How clean does it really need to be to get into the container? And your answer is we want it clean. We want them to be as clean as possible. So please empty out or clean out all of your containers so that way we don't have contamination mixed with these plastic items as they're getting recycled. We also get a lot of questions about lids and labels on containers. So the lids and labels can actually stay on, but I recommend that if you're putting your lid back on, that you don't turn it on so that it's so tight that it's creating air pressure. If you leave it just a little loose, that way as the container is being crushed or compacted, that lid won't build up pressure and pop off. Glass is another question that we get a lot, and it is accepted by some curbside recyclers, but not all of them accept it. So the best suggestion that we have is I would double check with your recycling collector to confirm if they do accept glass or if they don't. And if they don't accept glass, then you can always bring it to one of the city consumer recyclable collection sites. Any of those 19 sites that we have in Lincoln or 9 in the county do have glass availability for you to recycle your glass in. And when you're recycling glass, a couple of reminders that we have for you is that you want to recycle your bottles and your jars only, so not the window glass or the drinking glasses or the mirrors. None of that is accepted. It doesn't matter what color it is, we'll be able to take those colors. And one of the other items that we hear from our processors a lot is not to include any ceramics. So coffee mugs, they are extremely bad for the process of glass and can contaminate an entire load of glass. So we want to make sure that glass is free of food, liquid, and residue, and any of those metal lids or caps are removed from your glass before you put it into that recycling container. This, as you can see circled in this image, is a problem, and it is considered illegal dumping. We recently worked with the Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department to update Lincoln Municipal Code 5.41. And what that helps us is it identifies that this is illegal dumping at our consumer recyclable collection sites. It will be considered illegal dumping underneath that Lincoln Municipal Code, and it can be prosecuted against. Dumping these random items adds cost to city operation, adds cost to the collector's operation, and it ultimately adds cost for the residents. So collection sites are only for recyclable items, readily recyclable items. That includes glass bottles and jars, tin and aluminum cans, plastic bottles and jugs, numbers 1 through 5. We'll explain how to find that in a little bit. Cardboard and mixed paper only. I know that there are a lot of items out there that we want to recycle, and it can be difficult to find an appropriate time, location, place to dispose of these large items. But there are many options out there that we wanted to make you aware of. So the first thing is if you have a big or a bulky item that you want to get rid of, I would first contact your curbside garbage collector. Many times they will pick up that item for you. You just need to make sure that they are aware that you'll have that item left out there so they can make the appropriate changes or adjustments within their schedule also. Another thing you can do with your bigger or bulky item that you want to get rid of is to take it to the North 48th Street transfer station. We are open 7 days a week, 362 days a year, and our information is all on our website. We're happy to help you dispose of those items instead of having it left in an appropriate location. But if you have items that are good or clean and you want to donate them or have somebody be able to reuse them, we have a waste reduction guide available on our website, recycle.lincoln.ne.gov. And it has a thorough list of many different items that you can recycle here in our community, including electronics, appliances, and other items. So check that out for reference of where you can put these items. Now, one of the major questions that we get about plastic is, can it be recycled? But just because it's plastic doesn't mean that it can be recycled. And that's something that we can help you identify. So on our next slide, we're going to identify what plastics are accepted at our collection sites, which are number 1 through 5, and then what are collected generally in curbside recycling, and that's 1 through 7. So the best way to identify if something is recyclable or not is if you look to the far right-hand side of the screen, you can see the 3 chasing arrows and then a number listed in the middle of it. On our example on the slide, you can see it's the number 5. You always want to look for those 3 chasing arrows and the number inside to help identify if an item is recyclable or not. One other tip with this is sometimes you'll get into a styrofoam or a plastic film that has those 3 chasing arrows and a number inside. It's a little bit misleading. Those items are not recyclable in a curbside collection or at the consumer recyclable collection sites. Styrofoam does need to go into your garbage container at this time, and it will make its way out to the landfill. Plastic film we'll talk about very soon here and give you some guidance on that. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about it right now. So plastic film, as mentioned in the prior slide, cannot go into your curbside bin or consumer recyclable collection site. But one of our pro tips that we have for recycling plastic film is if you can put your thumb in the material and it stretches, then that is a film that can generally be recycled. So you can see on here we have bubble wraps, we have just plastic bags. A lot of the times we get questions about Amazon containers or the bubble wrap that comes in your Amazon packages. All of that can technically go together and be bundled in a bag that will head to a retail store, such as a grocery store or other retail stores in our community, such as Targets or Walmart. Plastic film can be recycled at those locations. It's a better place for them to go instead of in your curbside recycling because you know that they are going to be recycled correctly. Again, if those materials get caught in a processing center, it's dangerous for the workers. It can potentially cause fires. It can halt the recycling process. So we do not want those to go into the curb. The next item that we have to talk about is another question we get very frequently. I used my motor oil. I used my weed killer. Can I put those items in the recycling bin? And no, we do not want those type of plastics to go into the recycling bin. So they need to go into the trash can unless they have residue or material still left within them. So one tip that we have for you is to visit the website has2go.com. That is the website that identifies all of the materials that can be dropped off at Lincoln's Hazardous Waste Center. And the Hazardous Waste Center is generally available every Wednesday from 9 to 1 or by appointment, but currently they are closed due to COVID-19 and the lack of PPE or personal protective equipment that's needed in order to handle these hazardous chemicals. So we recommend that you call their phone number, which is listed on this screen, and you'll be able to talk to somebody about the material that you have to be disposed of and get it to a appropriate location in a timely manner. The last thing that we are going to step into is getting into the bigger, broader picture of something called the waste management hierarchy. And the waste management hierarchy is something we're really trying to bring to light to the public because what it does is it ranks waste management strategies from the most to the least environmentally preferred. As you can see, it's prioritizing the most preferred activities at the very top. We are really wanting the community to team together and follow the guidance of the waste management hierarchy, because by using this, you can reduce carbon emissions and preserve valuable resources and limited landfill space in general. So although we've gone over the fundamentals of recycling right in our community, and I'm sure there's more questions out there, we want to answer as many as we can, but we also want to take just a moment to talk about the ability to work your way up that waste management hierarchy. So we need recycling to be done, and we need it to be done correctly in order to make recycling long-term and sustainable, but so can reduce and reuse, and they need to be talked about together. So reduce being the first one on the waste management hierarchy is extremely important. Some tips that we have for reducing are only buying or purchasing items that you need, and looking for products when you buy items that have less packaging. Really simple reduce items include buying a water bottle or using a water bottle that you've been given by somebody instead of buying cases of bottled water. So you can refill that water with tap water or other means if you have it. Another item is bringing a metal fork with you to eat at lunch instead of relying upon plastic silverware. That can be just as simple as setting a practice and intention of putting a metal fork or spoon in your car or in your purse each day when you leave. Reuse is the second one on the waste management hierarchy. So reuse is an extremely good one to think about in a different light than just buying new. So renting or purchasing a used item from like a secondhand store or a thrift store is better than buying brand new. Repairing or repurposing an item is also an important piece of that. So instead of throwing out a pair of pants, you could mend it or work with a community member who may be thrifty at sewing to help you repurpose that in order to have more life in that product. Or you could use those pants or a shirt and just turn it into a rag for other cleaning that you may be doing before just throwing it away. It takes some creative thinking, reduce and reuse, but once you start, the opportunities are really nearly endless. And I know this community is full of creative people. So I would really like to open this dialogue of reduce and reuse and see what other communities are doing for those two R's. What do you do in your home? Do you have any tips or tricks that we can share for community members on our social media? Please don't hesitate to call or reach out to us at any point in time so we can share that information with others and we can all practice our 3 R's together. And with that, I will go ahead and leave it for our question and answer time. I just want to thank everybody for joining the call today. And I hope this prompts more questions. We're here to answer as many questions as we possibly can. And we just want you to know that we're a resource in the community. I appreciate the help of Carson and Global to help facilitate this webinar. And I'll go ahead and kick it back to Elizabeth to read off any questions that we may have.
Great. Thank you, Willa. We've had some wonderful questions come in during your presentation, as well as some submitted before. So we will try to get through as many as we can in the next 3 minutes, and we'll definitely follow up with folks if we aren't able to get to your question. So the first one, Willa, comes from Rebecca, and she asks if it's true that we should not put store receipts into paper recycling.
Yeah, store receipts generally have a layer of something on it called BPA. And we recommend that we leave as many of those additional chemicals out of the recycling process as possible. So those need to go into your trash can. Now, if you have a receipt from a contractor where it is a piece of paper and it looks like an invoice, generally a larger one, that can be recycled with anything else.
Great, thanks. And next question from Kaylin. She asks what the proper way is to recycle paper sacks and bags that have handles on them.
That's a really great question. So those handles can be made of many different types of material. Sometimes they can be fiber, sometimes they can be paper. My best recommendation for you, if you have one of those nice brown bags, is just to pull the handles off and throw them into your trash can, and then recycle the brown paper bag portion of it.
Great, thank you. This next question is from Jeannie, and she said that she's read that plastic can only be recycled once. She's wondering if that's true, or if it's possibly the case that that's only true for certain types of plastics.
That's a wonderful question. It really depends upon the plastic or the polymer that plastic is made out of. So I wanted to reach out to some of the industry professionals about this topic also. And they highlighted that some plastics, which are PP, generally a number 5, PET, generally a number 1, and then PE, which is generally a number 2 type plastic, can really be recycled over and over and over again. Some of the other plastics do have a life expectancy to them, and each time that they are repurposed, they do have a little degradation that occurs with them. So the PP, PET, and PE can be recycled over and over and over.
Great, thank you. I'm going to take one more quick question here. I know there's so many more, and we will get back to everybody, but last question comes from Mary Jo, and she's asking if we can recycle dog or cat food plastic bags.
If they are like a heavy plastic and you can't put your finger through it and stretch it, those cannot be recycled. Sometimes I recommend that if they're heavy duty like that, you could use them as a liner if you have a trash can that they can fit in, and then you can use that as a reuse item to put your garbage in and then put it into the trash can from there.
Great. Well, thank you, Willa, for the great guidance and the tips on recycling. I know, lots more that we could discuss. So we wanted to just let everyone know as a reminder, if you submitted a question that we weren't able to answer during the webinar, we are going to do our absolute best to follow up with you after the event to make sure you have the information. And then also just a huge thank you again to everyone for joining us today. Your interest and commitment to recycling and waste management is making a huge difference for our community and our planet. As a reminder, you can keep in contact with Recycle Lincoln for more resources, tips, and updates by following at Lincoln Recycles on Facebook and by signing up for the newsletter on the website, which is recycle.lincoln.ne.gov. With that, have a great afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining.